back to my channel. So in this video I'm going to do my monthly wrap up for April. I read 5 books, and this is actually the first time where I have set a number and actually accomplished that. I never really just chose books, like a set of books for TBR. I kind of just read for fun in between studying, basically. So it will be like a book here and a book there in between studying and, you know, writing papers for classes. So April was the first month where I said I was going to read these 5 books, and I actually finished these 5 books with a week left. Yeah. So the 5 books that I read were My Sister the Serial Killer, Infectious Madness, Jackal, Yemen in Crisis, and Manner of Death. And I'm going to go through them in order. Yeah, in order. So here's my little notebook, and I write my reviews and stuff in here. So let's start with Jackal. Jackal was the first book that I read and finished in April, and I give this book 5 stars. This was the very first fiction book that I actually annotated. And the reason why I annotated was because there were so many twists and turns in this book, and so many little clues that if you kind of read too fast, you were gonna miss. So I decided this would be a great opportunity to annotate. So I annotated all the little shocking things and the little clues, just in case, like, if I got to the end, it didn't make sense, I could go back and, you know, kind of piece it together. But this book was great. Like I said, I give it 5 stars. It was suspenseful. I love that our history was woven into the story. It wasn't force-fed, you know, it wasn't random like Black history facts. The facts that were in this book were actually woven into the story, so they made perfect sense to fall where they did. There were many moments in this book where I was shocked by it, and there were times in this book where I was like wondering who was talking, like whose voice were we hearing? Because in the beginning it was, you knew obviously you were the main character, but then there would be like interjections of a different voice, and you're just like, who is this person? Like, where is this voice coming from? Like, what role do they play? And as the book goes along, you do find that out. But that's another reason why I was annotating, because different people were talking, and it was like you were getting different sides of the story at the same time. There is such intricate detail in this book, and it draws you into each character. The details about the characters, they immediately pulled you into it, so you find yourself just as invested in the story as the female main character that you're following. There were many times throughout this book where I was just, I thought I had it figured out, and then there would be a little clue dropped, and then I'm like, oh, well then maybe it could be this person. And then so you get on this path of thinking it's this person, and then there's something else that happens, and you're like, well, maybe it could be this person. So it does a great job of keeping you on your toes and not really allowing you to figure out who it is until she wants you to know who it is, which is towards the end. But it was a great story, and I know that I want to read her next book, but I believe it comes out in 2025, so it's a long ways to wait, but I will definitely be picking up her next book. It's a great read. The next book that I read was Infectious Madness, and there really is no rating for this book because it is research material. That's really what it is. So it's based on research for mental health, and trying to draw or hypothesize that there are certain infections, or illnesses that you can contract as a child or in early age that can change what happens in the brain. And I feel like the first half of the book was focused on schizophrenia, and then she goes into talking about autism and OCD, and just providing research from other people as well who have started to, or who had formed the link that infection can change the brain and cause mental health issues where there might not have been had that person not had an infection at such a young age, or as I feel like it's saying, like, as the brain was still developing, basically. But I found it very interesting. There are a lot of people in my family who have mental health issues, some diagnosed, some undiagnosed, and I gravitated towards it because there are brief sections that talk about autism, and I have a 6-year-old son who's autistic. I am in the process of saving money to be tested myself because I genuinely do believe that autism is genetic in some sense. So this is very interesting reading for me. I also love this author, Harriet A. Washington. This is the third book by her that I have read. I read Medical Apartheid, and I also read Deadly Monopolies. And on my May TBR, her fourth book, A Terrible Thing to Waste, I also have. So that's on my May TBR. And that'll be the fourth book that I've read by her. She's very, very thorough with her research, and it is very easy to follow her train of thought. It's not, even though it's research, it doesn't seem dry. Like, it doesn't seem like a dry research book, because she does weave patient stories into it, so you can kind of get an understanding of where she's headed with the book in general. But this was the second book that I read, Infectious Madness by Harriet A. Washington. The third book that I read, My Sister, the Serial Killer. And I give this book a 3.5 because I think I might have went into it expecting it to be more than what it was. I'm very much a true crime person. I watch Snapped, I watch Killer Couples, I watch The Unexpected Killer, I watch those type of shows. So I think going into it, I was just expecting it to be more, just expecting more. And because like the first page, it like just starts off like, she killed this person and I'm going to go help my sister clean up the mess, basically. So I thought it was going to be just very detailed in, why she's killing these people, or, something like that. And it wasn't that. It was, I feel like it had its moments of being like dark and funny. And like, to me, it was just kind of like a cute thriller, if that makes any sense. I was waiting, like towards the end, I was waiting for like a real reason as to why the sister was killing these men. And it just never materialized. I know, like, in the book, her dad was a little bit abusive, and it just, like, I thought maybe that could be a reason, but then you, like, as she continues to kill people, you just are kind of trying to figure out like why, like what's going on in her mind that's making her want to do these things. And you just, for me, I never could figure it out. And then also towards the end, like I found myself like wishing that the older sister would just walk away from her. But then you realize like the older sister's identity is tied to being the younger sister's savior. Like whenever the younger sister does something, the older sister is there to clean up the mess. And then you realize her identity is tied up in that. So it wasn't a bad book. It just wasn't the type of thriller that I was expecting it to be. So My Sister the Serial Killer, I would give 3.5 stars. The next book that I read is also a history book, Yemen in Crisis. So this one obviously is not going to have a rating on, like, how dare I rate real life. So I'm not gonna, there's no rating for this, but based on what has been going on in the world, I find it necessary to learn as much as I can. So I picked up Yemen in Crisis to find out about Yemen. This is a straight on history book. So it talks about the wars, it talks about the government corruption, it talks about how the greed of a small group of people affected the majority, of the population. And it talks about what needs to be done in the future to help better Yemen. And I just think it's a great read to have a basis of what is going on and why certain countries are taking the stance that they're taking. So Yemen in Crisis. And the last book that I read for the month of April is Manner of Death by Robin Cook. And if you've seen previous videos, Robin Cook is pretty much the only auto-buy author that I have. I have been reading this man's books since I was in the 7th grade. I'll be 40 in 6 months. But this man, from like the first book that I read, Invasion, in the 7th grade, I have been hooked. If I hadn't done so much impulsive moving around, I would have way more books of his than I have. But Manner of Death. So this is actually the second book of his that I've read this year. I finished Night Shift, I believe, in January. But this is also another Jack and Laurie Stapleton novel. And but what I give it 5 stars. I give it 5 stars. He always does an excellent job of making you think about the dark side of healthcare. And it's not like he's creating these things. He's taking what is already been developed or that is on the future of healthcare, and then he'll take it to the extreme and show you where this could go. And I love that this book was more focused on Laurie this time. The past few books have been, Jack doing all the autopsies and Jack doing the outside investigating and Jack getting in trouble and Jack getting hurt and Laurie being the authority figure because she's the head of the OCME. But this book, Laurie was the main character pretty much. And I love that she was back doing autopsies. She was back, I don't know, just felt right. Like it was time for Laurie to make more of an appearance again, I guess. I was shocked by the twist. I thought because he kept foreshadowing, or he kept talking about a previous pathology student who had died doing, outside investigation, and she got caught up in the investigation and ended up being murdered. So we kept bringing that up, flashing back to that. So I was like, okay, so this must mean something different for this character. It didn't mean anything different, but what shocked me was the fact that, it happened again. But then the way that it happened, I was shocked because it was like in my mind, I was like, okay, now it's gonna be even harder for them to piece together, before you know, before more bad happens. But in true Robin Cook fashion, you know, things turn out great. I found myself, just because I'm so invested in Jack and Lori, I was, towards the end, I was just like, please don't let anything happen to them. Please, you know, like, this, it can't end with something happening to Lori or something else happening to Jack. Like, I'm just so invested in these two characters that you just, you know, with any lovable set of characters, you don't want anything bad to happen to them. But I loved this book. I love that there was a twist in it. I love that Lori was back doing autopsies again. I just, like, I love the way medical knowledge is just woven through these stories, and it just, I don't know, I'm just a medical person, so it just feels good and nerdy to just be in his books. So Manner of Death, 5 stars. So that is going to wrap up my April TBR.